Well, if any of you, like me, had expectations that FC Cincinnati was going to steamroll the Eastern Conference this season on their way to a second Supporters Shield and their first MLS Cup based solely on their first three performances this early part of the season, you, like me, were reminded that this is the MLS. And sometimes your team, no matter how great they are, no matter the star power they have, are just flat out gonna stink. We witnessed that this Saturday as FC Cincinnati got run over by Tigres and the Philadelphia Union. This is episode 406 of Cincinnati Soccer Talk. And today, much like the Orange and Blues backline, we will break down this match and then quickly turn our attention to this CONCACAF Champions Cup match tomorrow night as FC Cincinnati take on Tigres at TQL. My name is Brian Biedenbach. I'll be your host for the show, and I'm joined by a cast of three others who very likely have much more realistic expectations for this season than I do. Let's welcome them in. Let's start with Coach. Coach, how you doing tonight?
Hey, happy to be here. I'm just happy to see the one and only Jeremy Lance sporting the only haircut that matters on this show, being bald and beautiful, putting all of you haired people to shame, hatted and haired people.
Yeah. I was actually going to welcome you in as the bald guy without the shine, and Jeremy took his hat off. And so, I had to go another direction. So there you go. Jeremy, since we're talking about you, man, you're becoming a regular fixture on this show. Glad to have you back.
So are we saying hat back on? Is that what?
No, I'm saying do what you want. I had
the hat on. I had the hat on in our little pre-show, and then right as we were going on, I was like, this thing's kind of like itchy, and I'm just not going to sit here on camera and scratch my head all night. So I took it off right as we came on.
Is this your first Cincinnati Soccer Talk without the hat?
I think so. I wear hats always. Even around the house, I generally wear a hat.
Yeah.
It's because that's what I do.
We're ushering in a new era tonight. Jeremy with no hat on the podcast. Yeah. And finally, we've got Jason, who honestly, I think Jason really just wants to talk about his excitement about the possibility of a USL Division 1 and Pro Rel possibility, right, Jason?
Welcome. They're going to have a committee to discuss the possibility of having a committee to discuss the possibility of having it. Yeah. Great to be here, guys. The Saturday result made me regret my decision not to go to the Stadium Series up in Columbus. Had a chance to do that, passed on it, and then sat home and watched that game and like a moron. So, yeah, not the best decision.
Horrible choice.
It was a terrible choice.
I'm proud to say that I actually, not proud other than if it was a different game, but I actually forgot the game was going on Saturday night. I was watching my son's match. He was in it was a duel between him and the Wisconsin state champion 2009 U16s. And I got a text from a friend who's a Philly fan that just said something about Philly taking it to Cincinnati in the first 8 minutes. And I just hung my head and thought it's going to be a long, long night. I'm glad I'm not watching it. Oh, man. Well, hey, if you're anything like us, Saturday's result caught you off guard, but don't let your home's plumbing, electrical, or HVAC needs take the wind out of your sails. This March, we're waiving the service charge for all CST fans. That means a highly trained Apollo technician will come out for a free in-home estimate for any plumbing, drainage, electrical, or HVAC concern. Don't wait. Schedule online at apollohome.com or call us before this offer is gone with the wind. So thank you, Apollo Home, for your sponsorship of the show. Guys, let's get into talking about this match a little bit. Cincinnati comes home off a 4-1 shellacking in Philadelphia. We'll get into that match. We've got 3 goals from Ty Baribo, 1 from Bruno how do you say his last name?
Damiani.
That's what I would have come up with if you gave me enough time. Damiani. And then a 58th minute strike from Evander. That was the one that I saw as I was eating dinner and watching the end of the second half on my phone. I got excited about that one. Guys, what did we see in this game? We'll get into the tactics and stuff, but what did you see in this game? Just first impressions coming off.
Frustration. That was one of the most frustrating FC Cincinnati matches that I've watched in a very long time. Couldn't get anything going. And it was very, very hard to pay attention after a while because it was just so frustrating.
Yeah, I think frustration, and I think that the team, for large portions of it, almost looks like they didn't want to be there, whether it was the cold, whether it was the wind. I don't think that was actually the case. We're going to talk a little bit later in the show about, about performance periodization and how having multiple matches affects things, even if you're not playing. But the first impression, honestly, before I got to rewatch the match was just, wow, this team mailed it in. It was terrible. Now, as usually happens when I rewatched it and I started to see, like, man, that second goal was pretty fluky. Like the defense actually played that perfect, but for one player making, Anunga making a desperation lunge in panic mode to play Gazdag through, and things like that. And at the end, the team still had a chance to, claw themselves back into it. So on second watch, I thought, the team didn't play well, but it was not catastrophic.
Yeah. I was watching the second half on my phone. It looked like they just didn't want to play. I didn't know if that was just me watching on a small screen and I wasn't as interested. I watched the replay later and they still my attention was drawn elsewhere because I knew the result and they still looked like they didn't want to be out there. Right. Jeremy, what were your thoughts?
Well, I mean, according to social media, the wind was just debilitating and just choked out the life from the team. But they did, I can't remember the last time. I mean, obviously, there was several years where this club exclusively looked this way, where they literally looked hopeless for good stretches of this game. Yeah. Where they just looked lost. They didn't know what the answer was going to be. And then they were just kind of chasing it.
Yeah, somebody referenced the other night, we were talking, I think it was Rupesh even mentioned the St. Louis game a few seasons ago about the same part of the season. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, including that, right? And I will say, I didn't know the wind was blowing all that much until they zoomed in on Quinn Sullivan and his hair was blowing completely sideways off of his head. So the wind must have been an issue there.
I think that's just how he likes it, though. He just got one of those cool.
Carries a fan with him wherever he goes, and yeah. Guys, let's get into our best and worst from this match. We'll continue talking about the match, but let's jump into our best and worst. Coach, let's start with you.
Yeah, my best, to start with that, and I think I saw Jose already put this in, but my best is, I think, Obi Wobodo. But getting more macro, I think really my best is that the team that played really, really bad, and what I said, they still had chances at the end to feel like they might still be in the match. With 12 minutes left in the match, Kevin Denke could have put the team within one goal. And then you had just after that Corey Baird miss a header, which, the number of times we're going to say Corey Baird almost scored this year, start that tally now. But to think that you played so bad and to leave the first watch of that game, utterly just distraught, wow, what got into these guys? And then to think, oh, but actually had Denke put that chance away, they really could have gone on to win it with the momentum they had for the next few minutes there. Just makes it feels a little bit hopeful that you can be at your worst and still kind of be in it at the end.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, I guess I got to go right into my worst, don't I?
Yeah, man.
Because I said so many bad things in my best, I forgot there was a worst still.
I thought that was both.
Yeah. Well, my worst is worse than that because FC Cincinnati made me look stupid because I sat here on the last show and said FCC should be in all of these matches. I'm expecting wins and maybe settle for draws, and I didn't really think they would win and draw every single game, but I honestly thought this defense was so good after seeing Flores play. I thought this team is not going to get tonked at all this year. And then of course they go to Philadelphia and get absolutely tonked.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing. That back line is pretty stout, and then you put two defensive mids in front of them, and they still got broken down the way they did. So that's a good take there on that defense. Hey, as we go through our best and worst, if you're listening live here, go ahead and put yours in the chat. We'd love to share it and talk about them here in just a moment. Jason, let's go to you.
My best was seeing Evander get on the board. This is a guy that we're going to need to score throughout the year. He's not going to be asked to be our top scorer, but anytime you can have your number 10 come in and be a scoring threat was great. So kudos to him. Hopefully we see a lot more of that from him this season. My worst, I mentioned it earlier, just how frustrating the match was. It was the fact that they just could not break down the press. And I know Coach is going to talk about this a little later, but I grew up playing basketball, and I grew up learning. My coaches were big fans of Rick Pitino in the 90s, and learning to press was like the key to learning how to play basketball. What was it, 94 feet of hell that Nolan Richardson from Arkansas came up with? And the thing of it is, in basketball, at least with a press, you can break it down in 3 passes if you know what you're doing. And to watch FC Cincinnati not be able to translate that to the soccer pitch was really frustrating. And it's something they're going to have to work on, because every other team in the league is watching tape going, hey, these guys, they have trouble with the press. We're going to have to take advantage of that.
Well, we're missing our point guard, right? We've equated Lucho Acosta to our point guard in previous shows. So maybe that's it. We're just looking for the guy that's going to find the ball wherever it is. So yeah, those are good takes. Jeremy.
My best of the week is the fact that today is March 3rd. It is so early in the season. If you're using the old school mentality of like a Bruce Arena or a Ziggy Schmidt, these matches don't even matter. They don't even count this early in the season. Mm-hmm. This team doesn't need to, have it all figured out at this moment. Obviously, the sooner the better. And from a standpoint of wanting to win the Shield, wanting to, kind of have that highest seed available. Sure, you want all the points you can get, but it's so like, as much as Saturday night was just frustrating and awful, like, it's the first week of March. Like, who cares? Well,
I wonder.
This will be fine.
I wonder what Joe Burrow would say about these early games not mattering. Right? You look at the Bengals season, and 1 or 2 of those early games changes their season. This is a much longer season.
Yeah,
much longer
16 games versus 36 games.
But it's hard as a Cincinnati fan to go, the early season doesn't matter, right? So sorry to cut you off there, Jeremy. You got a worst still too.
I do have a worst. The worst was we still don't have Luka in the lineup. Yeah. Obviously, we want to see what the attack can really look like, and we can't see that until he shows up and is fully fit and fully ready to go. So, we still rolled into this match fairly incomplete.
Yeah, we've seen flashes of what the attack could be, and we've just been excited to see Orishano added to that. And then this week happened. So, hey, let's go to the chat here. Rupesh says he can't think of any bests, and his worst was poor selection of the starting midfield, which we'll get into actually here in just a few minutes. Rupesh, that's a good shout there.
It's very uncharacteristic. Rupesh. Yeah. Rupesh did not be optimistic in any way.
We've got best from Otto Baum, Evander scoring worst, even idiot Apple commentators commenting before the game that FC Cincinnati had a numerical disadvantage in the midfield. We've got the worst from Tim Sears, the Danke scoring streak doesn't last the whole season. Clifford Adams says the best is Buka coming on and logging it down. Worse than Nunga. It looks like you'd go through middle like a hot knife through butter. Be my guest. So good, best, and worst there in the chat. Mine, I'll say this. My best is Alvis Powell's ability to single-handedly break down an entire defensive unit. He does it about once every game. The way he takes on defenders, the way he moves the ball, the way he sneaks past them. And then my worst is Alvis Powell's finishing touch when he breaks down an entire defense. It's like he's got nothing left, and he's just swinging his foot to get the ball somewhere near the frame. I wish Alvis Powell could finish the ball. That guy would be lethal. I'd give him the ball any day in this press and just let him go. But anyway, best and worst, guys. Good takes there. I want to jump into let's talk about our starting 11. Because it wasn't when I looked at the lineup, when I realized there was a game going on, and I looked at our starting lineup, I was a little surprised by who was out there, who was paired, some of the pairings on the field, the partnerships and that. Was this what you were hoping for? And I know we've got a lot of matches. Cincinnati's played a lot of matches. There's been a lot of rotation in the lineup. We'll talk about that here in just a few minutes as well. Is this what you expected? Is this what you were hoping for?
Not
Jason?
at all. Not at all. We had heard earlier in the week that Luca Orishano was going to be available for selection. And I think in my naive mind, I thought for sure he'd at least be on the bench. I thought, I was not surprised to see a little bit of rotation. I thought Anunga played well in the CONCACAF games previously this week. And I wasn't surprised to see him on the team, but I was a little surprised to see him start. But yeah, the fact that we're not getting our top attackers on the pitch yet was very surprising to me. I thought it for sure we'd see Orishano at least play some time in this match.
Yeah. Jeremy, what'd you think?
Yeah, obviously the whole Luca thing, obviously I wanted to see him. We thought we were going to see him. That didn't happen. And then Anunga and Obi in the midfield, that combo just didn't really work as far as this. I mean, we just could not possess the ball in the midfield.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of really caused a lot of our troubles.
Yeah, when Anunga signed and we started talking about him and his past play, and we kind of equated him, like he and Obi are very similar players, and so maybe less on the attacking front than even Obi, but he's a guy that's going to come in, he's going to chew up minutes, he's going to finish a game. So to see them start together, I was a little surprised, thinking he would come in late in the match for Obi, or maybe start and Obi would come in late. Coach, we talked a little bit. You have maybe a little different take on this starting 11 than maybe the rest of us.
Yeah, I think I would say two things. First off, Buka played 80 minutes, 79 minutes on Wednesday. So of the guys that were your normal starting crew, he was the one who was not going to start this match, right? Unless you wanted to start running him into the ground like kind of happened last season right away. So Noonan's mistake for me was not in this match. I think he had to rotate Buka out, especially with Tigres on the horizon on Tuesday. I think the mistake was on Wednesday, playing Buka so long in that bench when you had a teenager and Steven Jimenez on the bench that he could have got into in a continental competition when you were in no fear of losing the tie. You might have lost that match, and clearly Noonan wants to win every game, and that's what he was worried about. But there's no way that Motagua was scoring 3 more unanswered goals there. Famous last words and all that. But the other thing is Anunga and Obi, can actually work if you're going to play a non-possession style, right? If you want to really sit deep and defend and then try to hit fast on the break, you can use Obi's energy and speed to hit long balls towards a Kevin Denke and have him run up to support. And Anunga just sits in front of the back four all day. He doesn't run anywhere. But FC Cincinnati, again, so this is a bit maybe of a Noonan thing. If you're going to start those two destroyers together, you can't then expect to possess your way out of a press. And maybe Noonan didn't want to. They actually played a lot of long balls early in that game. But as we kind of mentioned, they were playing against the wind in the first half, and that ball would just hang up and die. And the long balls were not getting FC Cincinnati anywhere. So I'd be interested later on in the season if we see that same pairing, if they play a bit more direct and maybe have a little more success.
Yeah. Besides our best and worst, was there anybody else on the pitch that impressed you? What'd you see in formation wise that impressed you, or somebody that you really had high hopes for because you've seen him in previous matches scoring, 3 goals in 3 matches that you were a little disappointed in with maybe a little sitter there in front of the net?
I'm going to jump in right away with an impressive, just to get a little bit of positivity out of there. And because I kind of touched on it in my best, but then didn't say it. I think Obi has looked back to his 2023 heights. It felt to me like he had a down season last year, but he only had a 24% possession loss ratio, which basically means he turned the ball over on 24% of his touches, which is a little bit high for a midfielder, but not necessarily for Obi. He still had 66 touches, but then defensively, 5 tackles tackles, 2 blocks, an interception, 10 ball recoveries. He had a game where he was so active, and he actually contributed about what we would normally expect him to in possession. It just happened that he didn't have anybody else in the midfield to actually contribute more, because Obi is supposed to be the one not contributing, and it said he was the one that was forced to contribute and just kind of hit his normal marks. But Obi, I thought, had probably the only guy on the pitch that I can definitively say he had a good game.
Yeah. Jeremy, what's your take?
I mean, who had a good game? I don't know. Sure, I'll just go to Coach. Yeah, that sounds good. Who didn't have a good game? Let's talk about the fact that like Yedlin and Miles Robinson are your veteran leaders. The guy is supposed to kind of, be the calm in the storm, and in this case, in the wind. And they were the ones getting smoked the most. Like they were, obviously that first goal, Miles gets ethered on that one, I mean those were the two guys you thought you could depend on, and they seem to be the most flawed of that back line, and they were all very flawed.
Yeah. I'll say this. I have a greater appreciation. We talked about this for Pavel Buka after a match like this. Then I know he's a great player. I know he's clean on the ball. I know he's our defensive mid that's going to push a little bit higher. But when he's not on the pitch, like, I just had a great appreciation for Buka when he came in and played the way he did and started changing things and moving the ball forward. So sometimes you don't know what you got till it's gone, right? Or it's not on the field, it's sitting on the bench. I really appreciated Pavel Buka after this match. Guys, I want to move into our tactical segment, because I want to make sure we have time to discuss this. Jason, you talked about the full court press early on in this episode of, pushing the ball forward. We saw a lot of that from the Union this week. Coach, talk a little bit briefly about the Union's press, what we saw, and how Cincinnati did or did not break that press all night long.
Yeah, so the Union set up in a 4-2-4. So they had a high line of 4 players. They're 2 forwards and they're two attacking midfielders, so to speak, across the front there, and then 4 in the back with 2 in the middle. So when you play like that, it's tough to play long because you're playing into a line of 4, and it's tough to play short because you're playing into a line of 4. It was not an all-out press, right? They didn't really go like we've seen some of the Red Bull teams in the past and just go after everything. They would sit back almost around the midline, especially when Miles had the ball in the center. And they would dare him, hey, play over us if you want to try to do that. But as soon as that ball got played wide, then they would move to constrict that space. It's what a lot of coaches will call a pressure pocket. You leave a pocket of space, and as soon as the ball goes there, you squeeze it. Now, there's possible solutions for this. The first one I mentioned, you play over that first line, but you're playing into a back 4. You're outnumbered there. So the only way you can do that is if your long balls are accurate enough to where the guy you're playing to, whether a forward or an attacking mid, can challenge for that first ball. So then you're looking for kind of slop, a knockdown, a flick on. They could not do this. FCC couldn't, because their passes out of the back were so bad that they were just giving Union defenders free headers. They would kick a long ball, and then Jacob Glesnes would just stand back there and head it straight back into the FC Cincinnati defense, 30 yards, right? The back 5, when you take the wing backs and the 3 center backs, were 6 for 24 on accurate long balls, according to FOTMAP. That means out of their 24 long balls, 6 of them got somewhere close to a target. So they're not playing long. Yeah, it's not. That
seems bad.
Yeah, exactly. And we all kind of probably intuitively saw this. And did the wind have something to do with it? A little bit. Another option is that you can switch the ball really quickly. So when they try to squeeze you on the right side of the pitch, you hit the ball backwards and get it out to the left as quickly as possible. But I think, again, a lot of that relies on good long passes, because those little short passes are not fast enough, and FC Cincinnati weren't doing it. Somebody in the chat mentioned Flores hitting a dime of a long diagonal to Lucas Engel. Well, that was in the second half. In the first half, there was none of that going on when they were against the wind. So that brings us to the last option. And I think this is the option that we've seen FCC try to do the most. And that is play quick combinations within the pressure pocket to beat that initial squeeze. So get out of that pocket with quick short passes. But the players you're playing to there are typically Yedlin and Engel. So they have to be able to look up and play one-touch passes into guys like Anunga and Obi and do it quickly enough and pass it to the correct foot. Right. So if you're playing from Yedlin into Anunga and you play it to his back foot, you just turn him back towards Miles Robinson. He's just playing backwards again. You have to play it to his front foot, what I would call the vision foot, so that he can turn upfield and look. And then because it's Anunga, he'll probably cut it back and pass it backwards anyway. But at least you give him the chance, right? But Engel and Yedlin were abysmal. Engel passed at 67%, and Yedlin completed only 59% of his passes. And then, like I said, Obi and Anunga aren't good at progressing the ball anyway, so they could not get out of that. And then, guys, just to wrap it up here, because I've been talking a while, I did think Pat Noonan tried to get creative. We talk about Carnell out coaching Noonan. Well, what Noonan did is he dropped Evander and Kubo into those wingback spots in build to let them progress the ball. And we saw that work at times against Motagua. I talked about it last week. This time, it didn't work because, again, then the guys receiving the progressive passes were Yedlin and Engel. And how many times, guys, did we see Yedlin just like run offside? I heard at one point the pitch side mic pick up Noonan yell, "Watch your lines" to Yedlin, because he was just standing offside half the time. And then you saw Engel time and time again just take donkey touches, doing his best first season Brandon Vasquez impression, balls clanging off his feet and going to the Philly defense. So in the end, all you need then is an Alvis Powell to just do his magic and just beat the press by himself, or, to not be silly about it. You need somebody to step up and beat the press on the dribble, which is where you really wish you had a Luca Orishano, because nothing else was working.
Yeah. Coach, just a question. As you heard you talking, some of us were talking last night about Cincinnati at times being, even in the past, it being a team that's they struggle to beat the press, right? And so we opt for maybe the short, quick passing in those tight spaces, like you talked about, the pressure pockets. But you have a wing back in like Alvaro Barreal or Luca Orishano, and you have someone like Lucho Acosta that's good in tight spaces, right? But it's been dependent on forwards or midfielders that have been converted to wing backs to play in those tight spaces. What do you think we'll see now that we have Lucas Engel that's more of a left back and Yedlin that's more of a right back anyway? Will we see Noonan change tactics a little bit to try and play more of that long ball, or are we still depending on these guys to play really tight, short passes in those tight spaces?
Yeah, I think he's going to have to loosen it up and play a little bit longer. The other thing he can do is continue to go with that model of pushing one of those attacking mids back into that space, like an Evander or Kubo. But I think if you're going to do that, you can only do it on one side, because you have to maybe pinch Kubo back as a right wing back, send Yedlin up the field, but then have Evander still in a midfield position to receive a progressive pass. As they tried it against Philly, both players were pulling back and wide, which meant when either of them received it, the other guy wasn't up there to play forward to. But yeah, something's got to give. I do think this is the kind of system, though, that one guy, a Luca Orishano, that anytime you give half a meter of space to, he's going to spin and dribble up the field. And we've seen Alvaro Barreal do it in the past. That one guy makes such a difference. Even if he's not beating a defender, the way defenders have to overcommit to him when he gets it means that one good pass all of a sudden gets you out of the press again.
Right.
Yeah. But Jeremy, what about even a guy like Luca Orishano? He comes in, he's coming off of 4 straight matches and his legs are tired. Can you depend on him? Like, I know that was an excuse. I'm saying this in jest a little bit. There's a whole tired legs excuse. Guys are fatigued, and we addressed it earlier. What do you say to that excuse? Is that legit, Jeremy, or is that something that we're just projecting on a team that's played a lot of games right now?
I mean, it's a little bit of a bummer that we're already talking tired legs in the first week of March 1st to be exact, as far as when this match took place. That's not ideal. Also, I guess whatever happened to, remember Diego Costa would eat that like horse placenta or something to like regenerate himself?
Yeah.
Are we not doing that anymore? Is that not available? Is the
Get out the jungle
FDA
gyms and
not
see if they
approved
have
that?
any.
Yeah. Why get us some horse placenta is what we're saying.
Oh man, Coach, in all seriousness, we've heard a lot of that. What do you give? How much credit do you give to tired legs right now?
I think Noonan said it all. He said, we're the guys who started this match played 45 minutes or less on Wednesday. Nobody should be out there being tired. But I think what is missed in that is the way that a professional athlete's body is tuned. Without getting into details, they have something that's called a performance periodization cycle, which basically means the way you ramp up to perform at your best is not you just go out there and do it. You don't come off of a day of rest and go out there and play your best. So there's a kind of a freeze thaw cycle within each week in these micro cycles of periodization. And if you have a game midweek, you never get a full training session and you're always recovering or ramping back up. And I mean, that makes a difference for your overall readiness.
Yeah. You know who knows something about that, Coach? I bet is Beyond Exercise.
Now that's Beyond what we call a transition.
That's right. Beyond Exercise is a local physical therapy and fitness business that helps people stay active and injury-free. They've helped some of our local MLS, MLS Next, and FCC Academy players with their health and performance needs. Check out their suite of services at gobeyondexercise.com. Guys, we're going to welcome in a special guest tonight. Speaking of tired legs, Cincinnati has a quick turnaround, not even Saturday to Wednesday. It's Saturday to Tuesday as Tigres comes to town on Tuesday night at TQL Stadium. We heard, Tigres are currly third in LigaMX Clausura, right? I think they just started climbing. They were fifth or sixth a few matches ago, climbed their way into third. They've had a coaching transition here just recently, like this was breaking news, as Veljko Paunovic was relieved of his duties and player Guido Pizarro was given the reins to take over there at Tigres. And so to help us understand what this means and help us get our heads around what we can expect tomorrow night at TQL when FCC faces Tigres, we're excited to be joined by Luis. Is it Luis?
Luis, yeah, Spanish pronunciation.
Yeah, Luis Leos, co-host of La U Times podcast, and he runs the X handle at Tigres English. He lives in Austin, Texas, but his football heart will forever be with Los Felinos. Luis, welcome to Cincinnati Soccer Talk.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I came here for the Cincinnati preview, but I'm staying for the horse placenta, so great to be here.
You can have my share of that. How about that? Luis, tell us a little bit about La U Times podcast and how you got into covering Tigres.
Yeah, it's a labor of love that started about 10 years ago. I had a personal account, and I noticed that probably about 98% about what I talked about and tweeted about was Tigres, and mostly in English. So I decided to fill the void. That time the club did not have an English account. And I noticed there was a lot of people north of the border that were interested in the team. And so I just decided I'm going to fill that void until the club does it. And so for many years, I was sort of the unofficial account for the team, putting out news, stories. And then eventually, about 3 years ago, Arnoldo Lozano came and kind of proposed to start a podcast, which became the La U Times podcast. And that's been going on for 3 years. And he's the mastermind of that. I can't take any credit for it. He's the MC, the host, the official host for the podcast, but I'm a regular on that show. And it's our objective is just to put out content in English for the fans, especially many of our fans that don't speak Spanish. And so we're kind of a bridge to bridge the community there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, welcome to Cincinnati Soccer Talk. We're glad to have you. Glad to be talking Tigres coming up. It's a matchup that, when we all saw the bracket, we thought, oh no, we've got a team that we're just starting to put together. We've got some new players, some dynamic players, but we've got one of the best matchups coming up in our bracket. If we can get past Motagua, we've got Tigres coming up in the second round, and we're excited about that. Now, before we get into that, there was big news that just broke in the last couple of days about your coach that we mentioned. And I got to say, Luis, I tuned into a little bit of your most recent emergency podcast that you guys did. And the celebration that was going on amongst the five of you about this coaching transition shocked me a little bit, that nobody was a little upset about it. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are feeling and what people that, Tigres fans are feeling right now.
You got to go back to last year. So the front office unexpectedly fired Robert Siboldi, who was our coach. He had won 3 cups at Tigres, one League Cup, and then 2 additional cups. And so he was having a lot of success. He failed in Liguilla, which is our playoff system, and got bounced. And shortly thereafter, got fired. And it was really unexpected. He was very well liked. He's actually a goalkeeping legend at Tigres. He was there during the relegation years back in '96. Stuck with the team where we played in second division. So there's a lot of history with him. He was very well liked, and it was unexpected that he got fired. And then the front office immediately goes and gets Paunovic, which was a big shocker. This is a guy that we had beat in a final against Chivas in Clausura 2023. And so everybody was like, why are we hiring the guy that we just beat in a final? It didn't make any sense. There was never any chemistry with the fan base. The fan base did not want him. He was seen as sort of a loser coach. I don't want to say that about a coach, but that's kind of the perception a lot of fans had. It's a guy that hasn't been able to win any big cups, that hasn't had a lot of success, doesn't have a big resume. So it was a definite downgrade going from Siboldi to Paunovic. And so we had a really rough first season under him. We got bounced in Leagues Cup against a really poor New York City FC team that wasn't playing very well at the time. And then, we got beat in our playoff system in Liguilla against, a very modest San Luis team. And so after that, we expected him to be fired. He also lost the derby, the city derby, which is really important to our fans. And he stayed on. And so it was a big shocker. And this season has just been a roller coaster ride. It's been up and down all over the place. There's no set system of play or anything like that. So a lot of us were happy he's gone. I mean, we deserve better. I think, he's a good coach. He's a good person, but just there was no chemistry with the fans in the locker room. There was no buy-in. So for us, it was a relief moving on and going with Guido Pizarro, who's a club legend.
Yeah, I think we've had our fair share of those coaches in Cincinnati that we've felt that way about. Am I right?
Too many.
Yeah.
Too many.
Unfortunately.
Also, we also know how to get bounced by an inferior New York City team. So
yeah,
feel that
happened to us in the playoffs. Yeah,
right.
Luis, you see the comment there about I always butcher his name, but Gignac, I believe is how it's pronounced. Yeah. Even to the casual, when they hear Tigres, they hear Gignac is the name that comes up for the fan. Tell us a little bit about his injury. Do you think that he's going to be available for the first leg tomorrow night, or what's the deal with that?
No, he did not make the trip. The team left around noon today, just after noon, like 12:30. They probably should be touching down if they haven't touched down already in Cincy. Mm-hmm. But he did not make the trip. He is one of 7 injured players, so we're very depleted. Unfortunately, the front office, social media has been very cryptic and secretive about his injury. They haven't talked a whole lot about it, but it is an injury that's lingering. So he recovered, tried to play for about 15 minutes, and re-injured himself. So I'm imagining for the rest of the season, he's probably going to play very limited time. And I don't think he'll be available at all for even the second leg. So unfortunately, we will not be seeing him in this series.
Well, that's unfortunate. We wish him well. I mean, it's fortunate for us Cincinnati fans. But
yeah, we like that.
We certainly wish him well, though.
Who are some of the players that we should be kind of be looking at when we go to the match tomorrow?
So there's 3 in particular that I really like. Our center back, Joaquim Pereira. He's a Brazilian center back, big guy. He's about 6'3", very physical, a lot of speed, wins a lot of his duels. I think your forwards are going to have a hard time against him. He is a brick wall back there. He's really good in the air. He's elite in the air. He's in his duels. He wins most of them. He's just very, very talented center back. So I think that's one guy you got to look out for. And then Juan Bruneta on the attack. He is a really good midfielder. Argentinian, has a really good touch on the ball, good dribbler, good passer, and can score. So I think those 2 in particular, I think, are going to be good to watch. And then our goalkeeper, Nahuel, who is, I don't know, he's just a wild card. You never know what you're going to get out of him. And so those 3, I think, if you keep an eye on, I think you'll enjoy watching them.
Luis, you mentioned that center back and that goalkeeper, and I guess Tigres is leading in terms of goals conceded in the Clausura this season, only giving up 9. Is it pretty much down to the individual performances of those players, or have they not really faced any big offenses yet? What do you put down the defensive success to?
Yeah, so far the competition hasn't been great. We haven't played a lot of the big teams yet. Cruz Azul is probably the one team that comes to mind that we've played that has the firepower. But this team's going on 13 matches without allowing more than 1 goal. And so it's a really good stat. And I think it all starts with our midfielders, our 2 holding mids that we usually play. Any combination, we have a ton of depth there. So Carioca and Suarg, who also didn't make the trip. Carioca and Gorriaran also didn't make the trip. But there's any combination there. We have a lot of depth, and those guys kind of work as our shield, our first line of defense. And then we have 2 really good center backs in Angulo and Joaquim, like I mentioned earlier. And then, we got a excellent goalkeeper, veteran, very, tested kind of goalkeeper.
Legend.
He's a guy that can, turn things around for us. So with that kind of, system in place, it kind of helps us out a lot to be able to not concede too many goals.
But have they faced an attacking duo of Sergio Santos and Corey Baird? I mean, no, we're looking forward to seeing that match and seeing how those guys perform. But Tigres actually they've struggled in recent years against MLS clubs in these continental competitions. What do you think it is? What do you think it is coming into MLS and playing and struggling against like a New York City FC in the believe it was Leagues Cup last year, and then taking a loss to the Columbus Crew in this tournament last season?
Yeah, and if you go back, we've had some really ugly losses against Seattle, for example, twice. We got bounced really ugly. So it's something that goes back at least 10 years, maybe even more, maybe 15 years. And it all started under Tuca Ferretti, who these types of games he never took seriously. So a lot of times he'd play an alternate squad, and that sort of mentality has kind of stuck around. This new front office, we had a change in front office and coaching staff and everything about 4 years ago. Sort of has tried to transition away from that to where we take these type of tournaments seriously. But a lot of our players are the core of our team, and our leaders go way back with this club. Some of them go back 10 years. And so that mentality has carried over where we don't always put out our best 11 and we don't always put out our best effort in these types of matches. Another thing to consider is that our squad is getting older. A lot of our guys are in their mid 30s or even older, like Gignac's already 39, and they struggle with the pace. A lot of times we're facing younger MLS squads, and when squads are swarming, when they're around the ball, it makes us uncomfortable. We're not used to getting pressed a lot in the league. And so the different styles of plays, the teams we face, like for example Cincinnati, they overwhelmed us at times. We were having to sit back in a low block, which we're not used to, and having to play counter attack football, which it's not ideal for us. We're more of a possession based team, and so when teams really make us work at a pace we're not comfortable in, then they hurt us.
Yeah. Have you or your team, have you done any scouting of FC Cincinnati? Do you know what your team's facing as they come up here? What do you know, and what do you see that may present a challenge to Tigres?
I think in the past, like for example, going back to that Columbus game, what's hurt us a lot is the opponent's wingers. So we have 2 good fullbacks, but they're smaller in stature. They're not as quick as other fullbacks in the league, and so they tend to hurt us there. So we struggle. So one thing that I'm going to be looking at a lot is those matchups. How is Jesus Garza, who's our left fullback, and Javier Aquino going to perform? And they're very good. They're very adept on the attack. So
how long has Aquino been back there? Because he was there, one of their marquee wingers back in the day.
So as he's aged, he's sort of transitioned all the way down into that fullback spot, and he's done it very well for us. But he's getting older, so he doesn't have the speed that he used to have, and so that's a kind of a weak point there when you're facing quicker opponents, faster opponents that can kind of exploit some of those gaps behind them. To me, that's going to be the most interesting aspect in this game is watching, for example, how Yedlin and Angle perform against our wingers, for example, right? And those battles, those I think are going to determine how this game plays out a lot, because I believe the midfield is going to be sort of a stalemate, and Denke and Kubo I think are going to run in, and we'll see when an unmovable force meets an unmovable object, or whatever the saying is. that sort of is going to be a clash there between the center backs and the center forwards, which would be interesting to watch. But I think overall those are going to neutralize themselves, and so there'll be other areas on the pitch that will get exploited, I'm sure.
Luis, a lot of times when Liga MX teams play up here in the States, I'm sure you've seen it too. We get a lot of fans of Tigres or whoever it is that's visiting. Have you heard from any local fans that are making the trip out here to Cincinnati?
From what I'm hearing, it's not going to be a big group of going. Probably less than 200, I would imagine. Just because ticket prices were kind of high, especially most of our fans are from the Houston, San Antonio, Dallas area, and so I think that kind of played a factor into it.
Yeah. If they get flights late enough, tickets are dropping right now. Yeah. So
hop in the car now.
That's right. That's right. I'm always impressed by visiting fans that come to TQL when we play these international matches, even when the United States plays there and there's visiting squads from the other side of the world, the fan base that shows up. So you may be surprised who shows up. We may be surprised. I hope for a good crowd on both ways tomorrow night. Looking forward to a good match. Gentlemen, you got anything else for Luis while we got him here?
No, just thanks for coming on. It's so low key. A couple years back, I had access to old Fubo TV when it was basically just an avenue to watch a lot of Spanish sports stations and watch soccer. So I actually watched a lot of Liga MX, and I'm going to say it on here. I actually fell in love with Tigres years ago. And
awesome, man.
And Aquino is my guy. So it will be interesting to see him. Now, for fans that want to boo somebody, I do know that Aquino, because I follow him on Instagram, is a Steelers fan. So you do have that. You do have that if you need to boo somebody for a reason.
I love it. Well, Luis, thanks for being on Cincinnati Soccer Talk tonight. LaU Times podcast on YouTube. You can find it, I'm guessing, anywhere you listen to podcasts is LaU Times. Where can we find you and where can we find your team?
So my handle is at Tigres_English. And I'm on there just about every day, putting out news, putting out some content. And then on the LaU Times, we record usually every Monday night, like you guys, except we're on the U.S. Central Time. So we start recording around 9:15 U.S. Central.
Yeah. And you got a show tonight, and I believe our very own Jose is going to be a guest on your show. So when you're done listening to Cincinnati Soccer Talk, bounce on over to LaU Times to listen to their broadcast tonight and hear Jose from Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Luis, thanks for being part of the show tonight. Really appreciate having you.
Thank you, guys. It's great meeting all of you.
Thanks, Luis.
If you are interested in supporting Cincinnati Soccer Talk and the content that we've been creating, there's a lot of new stuff coming out. We talk about it every week. We're building up what we have on our offerings on Patreon. We've got some patron-only live shows that we've been doing here and some conversations. And, to be part of the Growler Cup, you got to be part of a paid Patreon supporter. So if you'd like to support Cincinnati Soccer Talk and making content like this, head on over to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support, and we'll get you entered into the Growler Cup and all the other great content that we have there and everywhere else here at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Guys, we do have another match coming up next Saturday. It seems like so far away, and yet another quick turnaround. So we've got Tigres Tuesday, we've got Toronto Saturday, and then we're in Monterrey playing Tigres next Tuesday. So it's 3 more games in 8 more days. There's going to be a lot of tired legs. Let's just say that, if you want to say that. But we got Toronto coming up after this Tigres game. Toronto's coming into the match, having drawn week 1 with DC United and lost last weekend against Orlando City. They've shown, guys, that they can score some goals. They've got 4 goals in these first couple of matches, but have come in winless so far. What are we seeing? Have we seen Toronto play? We've got drama going on with Insigne, right? What is Cincinnati facing as Toronto comes to town?
It looks like a team that can score, but also can't keep goals out on the net. Seems to be their problem.
That would be the case.
Yeah. And, so long as you got more goals at the end of the game, that's what matters. Toronto, it's really interesting to me because at one point in time, Toronto was really the class of the Eastern Conference.
Oh, yeah.
They had, with Altidore and Bradley, they had some great clubs. And over the past few years, I don't know what has happened up there in Toronto. It has just been kind of a spiral. They're still a decent enough team, but they don't strike fear into their opponents as much as they used to. As we say after getting drubbed by Philly. So, yeah.
Well, they put all their hopes and dreams into 2 Italian guys that were completely disinterested in playing there.
That'll do it.
That didn't work out.
We know a little something about that too.
We've been there.
Parallels, yeah.
I would say what FC Cincinnati has to play against is the definition of a trap game. You have a game 100%. Against a team picked by a lot of experts to be a wooden spoon contender, sitting in between two matchups with Tigres in continental competition. A team that can score goals in Toronto, as you've said. So it's one of those games. If you don't come out defensively, tuned in and ready to play, you could be down. Maybe inside of 6 minutes. And then be playing against it the whole match. And then who knows, maybe, you have your star striker miss a point blank sitter and you end up losing 4-1. Just for example of something that could happen.
Imagine if that did. If that did ever happen.
I do wonder though, if the lineup on Saturday against Toronto is completely dependent on what happens tomorrow night, because Pat Noonan has got to be kind of considering what basket does he want to put his eggs in, right? Let's say we beat Tigres tomorrow and now we've got to go down to Monterrey and maybe try to advance. Do you maybe let Toronto be kind of a game you don't really care about at this point in the season? I'd be interested to see, based on Tigres, what happens there.
I wonder, a similar question that I'll pose to the group too is I just wonder, which game is more important against Tigres? Is it getting out on the front foot at home and we put out our strongest lineup and go for it while we're here? Yes. I feel like we have to, right?
Win tomorrow, survive next week.
Exactly.
You just hang on, just white knuckle it next week.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have the Toronto game, like you said, Coach, right in between there. How does that mess with kind of the player performance that you talked about earlier and the preparation, the recovery and all of that? It's a little bit longer. It's Tuesday to Saturday. So you've got some time in there, but it still plays with you a little bit because you got to turn around 3 days later and play again.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to see it. I think that Noonan already showed his cards in terms of if he was going to rest players with an eye towards the Champions Cup, he would have done it against Philadelphia, I assume. To then do that against Toronto, I'm not sure how much sense that makes. But that shortened time frame will essentially mean that you're going to play at Toronto on Saturday. You're going to have a complete recovery day on Sunday where you're eating horse placenta and sitting in hyperbaric chambers and getting your blood spun to oxygenate it and all the stuff that players do. And only some of that is joking. Players do a lot of crazy stuff, and then Monday you're already traveling again for your match. So it's you don't even have time on the training pitch, but for maybe a walkthrough in between Saturday and Tuesday. So because of that, if you don't rotate, if you don't have guys that are that don't play at all in the match against Toronto that you're going to rely on that next Tuesday, then you're basically saying, this is a crapshoot playing in Monterrey against Tigres, and let's hope for the best. If you want to give yourself a fighting chance, then you have got to rest guys against Toronto.
Justin brought up a good point in the chat, and you shared it there on the screen. And this is what Seattle did the year that they won the CONCACAF Champions League, was they focused entirely on CONCACAF, and it came back to bite them in the butt. In MLS play. I think they missed the playoffs that year entirely. I'm not saying we put all of our eggs in the cup basket, but I'm kind of with Justin. I'd much rather be focusing on this at this point in time than the early going of the MLS season. Because I think the team is good enough to finish in a top 4 spot without, knock on wood, without too much trying. And for me, I would love to see this team really focus on the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
And I agree with that. But the thing is wouldn't Noonan have done that in this match against Philadelphia? He rolled out a complete first choice starting 11, except for Buka, who's like one of the younger
one
players.
Guy he needed to keep.
Right. It's like you would have thought that guys like Obi or guys like Yedlin, like kind of the older players, some of those guys, maybe even a Miles Robinson, those are the guys you'd think that you would have rotated if that was the game. I get the feeling from Noonan after watching episode 2 of that Onside documentary that he's just like, he doesn't care. He's just like, no, we're going to win everything. And you just go F and score your effing goals. And that's all you have to do. And you win. So I think it's Noonan's might be his downfall. If you remember when, if to bring up a dark memory, all of the cramping that happened in the Eastern Conference final the year that FCC won the Shield, a lot of that was because Noonan puts all his eggs in all the baskets.
Yeah,
bird flu's not affecting him none. He's got all the eggs.
By the way, speaking of the quick turnaround time and all this, you also need to factor into this. When they go to Monterey, you also have to deal with altitude.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an added thing to get over in the short turnaround and recovery and all that.
Yeah, and no time to adjust to it, right?
I'm guessing they're flying in probably, the day before?
Yeah, that'll be a challenge. That'll be an interesting game next Tuesday night. Let's take this first one. And let's win big. Let's get the fans excited back at TQL for this next match before Toronto comes to town. The good news, guys, is as of now, the weather looks beautiful for next Saturday. No wind in sight, so hopefully Cincinnati can play at their best with no wind.
Man, I tell you,
not so much tomorrow night.
Wind, that wind was on par with the quote unquote cold that our former president had at a debate, where it's like, really, that caused all of those problems? That's astounding.
Oh, if you want to get in touch with us, maybe Jeremy at Cincinnati Soccer Talk, you can tweet us on X or whatever you do on X now. You don't tweet anymore. At Cincinnati Soccer Talk, or email us at feedback@Cincinnati Soccer Talk. We'd love to hear from you about our show, anything else you'd like to hear from Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Guys, in our final thoughts, let's jump in. Jason, I'm going to let you get us started here as we wrap up the show.
I'm going to change mine from what I put in the rundown because I got a Facebook memory today, and I guess it was 6 years ago today that FC Cincinnati played their very first game at Seattle Sounders. And I got the memory because I was there. I was living in Salt Lake. Flights to Seattle were really cheap, plus I had a bunch of Alaska Airlines points from work. So I got to fly out, got to see the first game, got to see that Leo Bertone, I think it was.
Bertone piss missile that he fired.
Oh, my word.
Spectacular goal.
I remember that one.
From the upper corner where they put you in the CenturyLink field, and you are a mile away from the pitch. But it was a great memory, and it was great to see all the FCC fans there. So happy 6th MLS anniversary, FC Cincinnati, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. That would have been fun to be there. I remember seeing that and all the high hopes we had with these new players that came in and how great that first season was going to be in MLS.
I went to the Atlanta match the following week in Atlanta, and I wasn't even at my seats, and we were already losing.
Yeah. Reality struck real fast that season. Coach, how about your final thought?
Talk about some dark memories you guys are bringing up. My final thought, just basically Jeremy touched on it off the very beginning with his initial thought, is that when he said it doesn't even matter almost this match, it's so early. This is not the end. There's some team, you might have heard of them, called Inter Miami, that lost, I think, like 6-1 to some other team last year and still won the Shield. Can't remember who that was. And then your very own LA Galaxy started the season season with 3 wins, 3 losses, and 3 draws. And those 3 losses included a 3-0 shellacking at the hands of RSL. And then later that season, they lost 5-1 to the Columbus Crew, and they still won the cup. MLS is a wacky league, and especially this early part of the season is really about finding your feet, clicking on all cylinders, and really going into the back end of the season, doing well. So this is not the end. Onward and upward from here.
Yeah, good one. Jeremy.
My final thought, I changed it because I just felt like I was going to be echoing everybody else's thing and myself about like, hey, it's early. Don't just everybody calm down. Coach, you mentioned it a few seconds ago. Dude, watch that Onside docuseries on Apple for MLS. This is was the highly touted docuseries that the Drive to Survive producers and everybody were behind. It's really good. And the episode 2 is about it's technically about all the rivalries, but it's mainly about Hell is Real and the greatest cinema that is the juxtaposition between Wilfred Nancy and Pat Noonan. Pat Noonan just MFing everybody and just being super blunt and even like talking about how he doesn't understand like the high like coach like speak and plaudits that a lot of guys like will just say these like grand statements. He's like, what does that even mean? And then you have Wilfred Nancy, who's French and just very philosophical and very calm and cool. It's one of the funniest things you'll see, and it's just a good episode that obviously is, I believe, the only episode of the series that focuses on our club. So, it's good for that reason too.
Jeremy, to put it in Cincinnati terms, I would say Wilfred Nancy is the Hyde Park Country Club to Pat Noonan's watching elder football games and tailgating with his light beer in the parking lot.
Pat Noonan lives in Delhi.
Yeah.
I was going to say Cheviot, but
he's a Norwood guy.
Feedback at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. No. Oh man, guys, I just reserved my final thought for just there are plenty of seats left in the stadium. I was on looking tonight. I'm coming to town. Last Monday I was excited. Then last Thursday plans changed and I couldn't come to the match. This morning, I bought my tickets for the match tomorrow night against Tigres. I will be in the stadium. I'm excited to be there. And I would love to see a packed stadium. And as of now, there were a ton of tickets available. So if you've got a free night on Tuesday, you're going to see a great match between FC Cincinnati and Tigres coming to town in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Come on out. Come find one of us if we're there. We'd love to say hello and see you there in the stadium. But besides us, come out, watch a great soccer match. You can get cheap tickets in the Bailey. We'd love to see a full house. So, guys, thank you for joining us tonight here on Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Thanks to everybody for watching and for listening. And hopefully we've got an exciting show. We'll have a show later this week, but hopefully it's an exciting show after this win against Tigres later on this week. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Peace.